NAACP and the issue of school choice. And our host is Mike Mulhall.
Good evening. Welcome to the American Family Association Presents. Our topic tonight is the NAACP and the issue of school choice. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, is the nation's oldest, largest, and one of the finest organizations devoted to fighting for equal opportunity for African Americans. One area most Black Americans feel shortchanged is in the area of education, where polls have shown they're very dissatisfied with educational quality. This is also why every poll has corroborated or shown most Blacks favor school choice with scholarships or vouchers. In other words, give parents, especially poor parents, their fair share of the educational tax dollar in the form of a scholarship or a voucher to use at any accredited school of their choice. Yet when President Bush addressed the 2006 NAACP National Convention in Washington, D.C., President Bush was booed on only one issue. That issue, surprisingly, was the issue of school choice. Since most African Americans favor school choice, why would the NAACP attendees react so negatively when he mentioned that one issue overwhelmingly supported by many in that very same African American community? Is the NAACP out of touch with the community it supposedly represents? Or does the NAACP have a different agenda from most Black Americans? That's tonight's topic. Our guests are Bill Andrews and Frank Russo. Bill, who has a child in the New York City Public Schools, is a Brooklyn businessman who serves as the Vice President of the United New Yorkers for Choice in Education. Bill also serves as the Chairman of the Consumer Action Progressives of Bedford-Stuyvesant, a $50 million economic development corporation. Our other guest this evening, Frank Russo, is President of the Port Washington Education Association and a former division manager of the Verizon Corporation. Frank is President of the AFA of New York and has 7 children and 21 grandchildren with his lovely wife, Betty. Frank also has 5 teachers in his family and is a founding member of LIFER, Long Islanders for Educational Reform, a Long Island group concerned about excessive school costs and taxes. We contacted the NAACP a dozen times and spoke twice with Hazel Dukes and Michael Watterson, NAACP's National Director of Educational Policy, to invite them on this program. They declined. My co-host this evening is Patty Knapp. Patty?
Thanks, Mike, and welcome to you both, gentlemen. My first question to both of you, first to Frank. Would you agree that most polls show that the African American community is not all that pleased with the quality of education provided to its children, and for that reason that most polls show Blacks favoring parental choice in education?
Yeah, this is an issue I followed for over 30 years, Patty. And I must have seen at least a dozen polls, without exaggeration, maybe as many as 20 polls over this 30-year period. And every single one of them shows a distinction between Black voters and white voters. Black voters overwhelmingly favor school choice. They want the right to be able to pick a school for their child because they're very dissatisfied with the quality of education their kids are often receiving. The white community seems divided, 50-50. Sometimes it might be 55% one way and 45% the other, vice versa. But the Black community, every time, it's between 70 and 85% of the community overwhelmingly in favor of school choice. We saw in Milwaukee where they had the trial, African-American and single mother Polly Williams, an assemblywoman, got together with white conservative governor Tommy Thompson. They put together the first voucher program in the country. It's now in its 16th year, tremendously successful. And it showed the overwhelming desire of the poor Black parent to be able to pick a school for their child.
That's right, and very often the driving force is that people don't want to just send their child to the school that happens to be nearest to them in the community. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I concur with what Frank said. I worked on some of the scholarship work that was done in New York City. My wife and I, we passed out at least 20,000 scholarship applications throughout the 5 boroughs to try to get parents into some kind of voucher type program or scholarship program, because parents overwhelmingly in the city are against the present public school system, because really it's been an overwhelming failure for the majority of the kids. Always with any system people are going to get through, but if you look at the overall situation, it's a failure, and it's a failure because the American way is not present there, and that's competition.
So the inner city parents are the ones that are most affected, or at least they
Absolutely,
feel
absolutely.
so. What is the position of the NAACP on the issue of granting parents, especially lower income and middle income parents, the right to choose their child's school, public or private, to have a fair share of the educational tax dollar assigned to that school of their choice?
Well, from the resolutions they pass, they're overwhelmingly against giving parents choice in education. I'm not a member of the NAACP, so I don't propose to speak for them, but I can tell you, as he indicated in the beginning, that the NAACP is a civil rights organization and has a tremendous track record. It seems like they're out of touch when it comes to education, because if your overwhelming population wants some issue and you go against that issue, the question is why. And what I've told Frank and other people, then I think what we should look at is where their funding sources are coming from.
That's a good point. And of course, we want to emphasize again that we invited them numerous times on the program, so we really can't speak for what their reasons would be. But Frank, what's your understanding of why they wouldn't support this?
Well, I did get to speak to Hazel Dukes. She was kind enough to return. She's the president of the New York State Conference of the NAACP. She returned 2 of my calls. First one was not all that friendly for some reason. Second one, she was quite friendly. Said she had a previous engagement, even though we extended this invitation a month before the taping. I invited her to send any delegate, any representative of the NAACP she chose. She said she'd look into it. I called her 4 more times afterwards. Could not get anyone. I dealt with the national NAACP. I called Bruce Gordon, who's the president of the NAACP. He was a former executive along with myself at Verizon. We were both there for 30 years. I thought that when I saw that he was the head, I was a little optimistic. Couldn't get a hold of him. Got a hold of Dr. Jackson's office below him, and then this Michael Watterson, who's the National Director of Educational Policy for the NAACP. Spoke to him on 3 occasions, perhaps, and all his staff. Had literally over a dozen calls with the national office. Mr. Watterson did fax to me their positions. They took positions in '84, in '92, and '93, strongly opposed to school choice. I submitted to him a couple of questions. I said, Michael, in view of the showings in poll after poll, and I did this in writing, that African Americans overwhelmingly favor the right to choose their child's school, public or private, using vouchers or scholarship, how does the NAACP explain its position in clear opposition to that of its constituency? No answer. Then I asked, why shouldn't black parents, especially low-income parents with children in public schools that fail year after year, not have the right to their fair share of the educational tax dollar to direct to the school of their choice? Again, he failed to answer. I'm very disappointed in their failure to respond.
What I would like to do now is show a short clip from a recent 2020 special on ABC with John Stossel, which was titled Stupid America, which shows why so many people, and especially minorities, want school choice. Could we please roll that clip?
Many charter schools are succeeding. Friendship Charter High is located in the same dangerous part of Washington, D.C. as Ballou High, one of the city's poorest performing schools.
Begging my money, I'm gonna kill your ass.
The student populations are similar, mostly poor and minority.
I think he's a good friend.
But at the charter school, there is order. The kids are on task and doing better. 95% of the graduates get into college.
Is this school better than the public high schools?
Yes. Yeah, of course.
Well, why of course?
The charter students recognize that their school is different. The teachers, they say, they're happier to be here.
What does the hyperbola always have to have in it?
This teacher got Rashawn Miller interested in math, a subject she used to hate.
What'd she do differently?
She makes it fun. She makes it fun.
Danielle.
Making it fun could help them keep their jobs. She's here because 1/3 of the previous teachers were fired.
I love teaching here.
The best teachers make extra money.
We can give bonuses. We can have Saturday school with pay. We can do summer school and reward certain teachers.
The kids see the results.
And people here care more?
Yes, definitely.
Good morning. Get the jacket off, phone up.
Friendship's principal knows if the school doesn't perform, he'll be held accountable.
We can be closed. We can't settle for just being good enough.
This makes charter schools innovate.
And if the teammate asks for help, what do we do?
Yes.
This one keeps kids in school till 5 p.m.
Hello?
And teachers give kids their cell phone numbers.
Hello?
Hello, Miss Holmes.
And in the evening, every teacher must be available to answer questions.
I had a question on the review sheet.
Okay. I get phone calls at all hours of the night.
Hello?
Teachers say the kids call constantly.
Hey, Christelle, what's up?
So many kids want to get into those schools, the schools have to hold lotteries like this one.
358-1051.
The suspense is unbearable.
I pray that they're going to pick on.
So much is at stake. The winners get a shot at a better future. They spin the drum.
Number 11.
Look at that smile. Look at her smile. Listen to her delighted scream. But why do they have to win a lottery? If school money were attached to the child in the form of a voucher, every parent could take their child to new schools.
Vouchers, no! Yes! Vouchers, no!
But lots of people hate vouchers.
No public money for private schools!
Last week's Florida court ruling against vouchers came after this teacher brought a suit.
To say that competition is going to improve education, it's just not going to work. You know, competition is not for children. It's not for human beings. It's not for public education. It never has been. It never will be.
Why not? Would you keep going back to a restaurant that served you a bad meal? Or a barber that gave you a bad haircut? Competition makes everything better. Why would schools be different? In the few places where vouchers have been allowed, like Milwaukee, the kids who used vouchers did better, and the kids in nearby public schools did better.
They improved by leaps and bounds. No one lost in Milwaukee. Everyone did better. The kids at the regular public schools did better, and the kids who went to the voucher schools did better.
Of course they did. That's what competition does.
Choice, to me, is the only way, I believe, that we can force the system from an external vantage point to change itself. It will never change itself from within. Public education will never change. All the reform.
These are well-intended people who want to help kids.
All the well-intended designs and programs du jour, unless there is some competition infused in the equation, unless that occurs, then they know they have a captive monopoly that they can continue to dominate.
Hands, please.
But if there were competition, if parents had a choice, the possibilities of what we could have are limitless.
That's our program
What
for
we've just
tonight.
been watching is obviously a clip from John Stossel in 2020 titled Stupid in America, and it was illustrating some of the issues, obviously, as it relates to school choice. I want to come back to our guests and just discuss. Frank, I know you did everything to try and get the NAACP to send someone to speak for them and explain what appears to be an untenable choice that they've made in terms of their understanding of school choice and how the African community overwhelmingly supports this. Whom did you actually speak with, and why do you think they declined our invitation to come and be a part of this?
Like I said, I spoke to Hazel Duke twice, Michael Watterson, the national director for the national NAACP, director of education, spoke to him 2 or 3 times, to his staff. Peter Brooks, wonderful guy. He was one real cooperative guy over there, the one most cooperative. It comes down, in my view, to one word: utter hypocrisy. They are the most hypocritical organization I can imagine. I hate to say it, but that's my honest view of them. I could not get from them an answer to that question. I put the question to them. I emailed the question to them. I posed it to them several times. I cannot get an answer why they're opposed to allowing African-American parents to pick a school for their child when they're not happy with their local public school. I get no answers at all. Hazel Dukes went ballistic, and no explanation at all. My own guess is that they're in cahoots with certain politicians, key leaders in the Democrat Party. They're in cahoots with the union, the teacher unions, who must give them a lot of money. I honestly don't know. That's why I wanted to get them on here, to ask them, why are you opposed to giving people in your community who you supposedly represent the right to pick a school for their child? They want equal opportunity. They deserve it. Why don't you give it to them?
Bill, do you have a comment?
I think Frank said it all. I mean, you just have to follow the money. I mean, I hate to be cynical about this, but I mean, the clip that was just shown, it speaks for itself. Any reasonable person would think, well, listen, if the system we have today is not working, let's try something different. I mean, I'm really against that, the teacher in Florida, when she says the American way, competition is not going to work. I mean, where has she been? What planet is she on
works
without
in every other-
competition? And we have this competition in the colleges and everything. There's no, why not give the children the chance where it's most critical in the elementary and secondary level?
Well, this has been an interesting discussion. We're at the halfway point of our show, and I'd like to resume this, but right now I'd like our guests to stay tuned for a public service announcement. We'll be right back on the American Family Association. We're having some technical problems. Please stay with us. We'll be shortly.
Another question?
Another question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're off track here. Well, Hazel Dukes was very clearly stated she was opposed to providing African-American parents with the right to choose their child's school. What are the possible reasons why she or the NAACP would be opposed to giving?
I tried getting that from Hazel Dukes. I got no lucid explanation, and that's the key word, lucid. She went off in a harangue, really. I'm against vouchers. She was screaming at me. This is the first call I'm against vouchers. I don't want any. I want all the money going to the public schools, no money going to any parents. I said, well, do you understand, Ms. Dukes, that if you have vouchers, that's going to leave, and you give a small, the vouchers are never set, by the way. If we spend $15,000 per New York State student, the vouchers would be maybe $6,000. Way less than half the cost of a public school education. That means if any children who go to these non-public schools with the vouchers, there's a big savings, and half that savings goes to the taxpayers, and the other money goes back to the public schools, so the public schools wind up with more money per pupil. So the public schools get more money per pupil, the taxpayers save money, the parent gets to pick a school for his or her child, the student's going to do better, the public schools learn that they better compete or they're going to lose some of their customers, so to speak, so they get better, everyone wins. But the teacher unions don't want to give up their monopoly, and they pressure the Democrat Party, and they pressure the NAACP to kowtow to them and to heck with the wishes of the poor African-American parents.
Yeah, it's another form of 21st century slavery. You know, those that are against real progress, they buy off the chiefs and control the masses.
That's an interesting way of putting it.
Given the fact that we have so many problems impacting the state of New York, the chief among them has been education, the ability to fund that education, and of course we know that the single greatest way for people who are in poverty to escape poverty is through a strong education. How can any organization, and I wouldn't single just out the NAACP, but how can any organization be against school vouchers or school choice?
Yeah, because the people that are in power, nobody wants to give up power, and the teacher union controls and have a lot to do with that budget, which is approaching $20 billion for New York City. Think about that. $20 billion being spent in the city for education. It's more than most countries' GNP. That's right. And that's what we have. And you have, it's interesting because I just read in the paper Friday where they said charter schools are outperforming, quote, public schools by better than 5 to 6%. So why would anybody want to keep a system that's a total failure, you know, in existence?
It's not a defensible position. It's only political.
Now we are ready to take our PSA. You're watching the American Family Association. Please stand by for an important announcement. We'll be right back.
I wish I had known. Nobody told me that 40 years of research and 28 medical studies have shown a significant link between abortion and breast cancer. I didn't know abortion could increase my risk of breast cancer by 50% or more. Now, I've got breast cancer and learned the abortion I had when I was 17 was a major risk factor. I want to let other women know because I would give anything to have known. Whether you're pregnant or had an abortion, learn the facts today.
As African Americans, we have a heritage of brotherhood. We have overcome much to survive. But today there's a genocide threatening to erase our hope and eliminate our future. It is 3 times as likely to strike black women. It's claimed 14 million of our children. It is abortion. You see, abortion doesn't solve problems. It just creates different ones. I know. So help restore our dream by restoring the dignity of human life in our communities.
Welcome back. You're watching the American Family Association tonight. Our issue is the NAACP and the issue of school choice. And my co-host is Patty Knapp. Patty?
Thanks, Mike. Bill, I'll ask you first. What would be the cost to taxpayers of providing scholarships or vouchers for parents to choose the school that they prefer for their child? And the fact that the NAACP can't defend their position, what does it say about their priorities and their agenda?
Well, their priorities certainly is not for the benefit of children. That's for sure. I mean, so you answer your first question, it'll certainly be a lot less than what we're paying for education right now. The last time I saw, even if we got a voucher of $4,000, where I know they're spending upwards in the city, supposedly 12 to 15,000 per child, the Catholic Church and their educational has shown that you can educate children for $6,000 and do a fantastic job. I think there's a lot going into this, why we don't have a voucher system, why we are not letting our children get the best education that they're entitled to. I don't know, as I've said earlier, it seems that those people that are in a position to make decisions do not want to give up a system that's in the benefit for our children and the next generation of Americans. They would rather see us go down like that, being stupid and not educating and building more prisons than building universities. It's really sad.
I think it's just important to mention, though, that the National Education Association, not every teacher is a member of it, and some teachers that are members of it aren't aware of how ultra-liberal the lobbying efforts of the NEA are.
They are just for defending their monopoly and their jobs. They don't care. Really, the kids are way low in priority. I'm just so disappointed in the officers of the NAACP that they're putting some other agenda, which agenda I don't know for sure what it is, because they won't come on and talk about it. I think they're embarrassed about this subject. They're embarrassed about their own position. Mr. Watterson could not give me any explanation for why they're taking the position. Hazel Dukes could not give me any explanation. She just went off into a frenzy.
Because once you understand it, it's a no-brainer. There's
Absolutely.
no way to defend it.
And what the typical black parent wants, they don't want a handout. They don't want welfare. They want equal opportunity. And to get that, you need a fair and just education, a good education, which a large number are not getting in the schools they're in. The NAACP's position on this is outrageous.
Frank, can you go into a little bit Milwaukee and any other cities that have had this program for a while and what the effect has been?
Milwaukee, Cleveland, now Washington, D.C. as a result of the action of the United States Congress 2 years ago. And again, it was the Republicans that pushed it. The Democrats, who were supposedly get all the African-American votes, they opposed school choice in Washington, D.C. But the parents in Washington, in Cleveland, and Milwaukee love it. In Milwaukee, it's been in effect 16 years. At first, they limited it to 15% of the student population. At the first few years, nothing happened. By the third and fourth year, the kids in the private schools were doing better. 2 or 3 years after that, by years 6 and 7, the kids in the public school were doing better because they knew they had to compete or they're going to lose their students. Now everyone's happy. Mayor Norquist, who was opposed to it, is now gung-ho for it. He says anyone who's against vouchers is crazy. He says that. And he is also saying that the Democrat Party is in an awkward position because they want to appear to be supporting the lower income families and middle-class families. But on the other hand, they also want to support the teacher unions. And they're being torn in 2 different directions because the teacher unions' interests are not consistent with the poor and with the African Americans. And the Democrat Party, he said, unfortunately is siding with the teacher unions against their poor minority community.
I was just going to say, it's sad. It's really the teacher union leadership, because a lot of teachers that I've spoken to, they would love vouchers, but that leadership keeps them blocked. So we have a lot of anti-American activity going on even within that union. So you know they're not going to let the kids come out because the children, keeping them depressed in education allows a lot of programs to get funded and waste our tax dollars.
And Bill's right, it's the union leadership, because my 5 teachers in my family are gung-ho for choice in education.
Well, it's funny because you're both highlighting on 2 subjects within this topic, and that is, you mentioned politics, you interacted with the relationship that the NAACP has had with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is a party that supports abortion and would support choice in that area, but would not support choice for where to put your school.
It's incredible.
They want to give the money to the black parent to kill a baby, but they won't give money to that same black mother to educate a child where she chooses.
Inconsistent at best.
Give the parent money for food stamps, anything else, but not education. Why?
That's a really good point.
The second issue I was going to say is this is not an African-American issue only.
No,
this is an American issue. This is a New York issue. We are all invested in this. And
Mike, everyone wins. The taxpayers are going to win with this. The students are going to win. The parents, everyone wins, but the teacher unions don't have their captive monopoly anymore.
Everybody knows property values, everything goes up when you have a good school. We wouldn't have to be spending so much money on transportation, which quotes the choice program they have in the city. if we had built competition into the system. It's not there.
So from Montauk to Buffalo, for all our people out there who are watching our show tonight, can we provide any other reasons for supporting school choice besides improving educational quality, which we're all in agreement on, and besides lowering costs? Are there additional benefits?
Moral reasons, in all honesty. And I say the moral values of all parents. Parents worry about their children, how they're going to turn out, who they're going to marry, what kind of moral values they have. In the public schools, you can't say a prayer. That's fine. If you don't want to say a prayer, pick the public school. But if you want your child to say grace before meals, to be taught respect for another person, to be taught that there is a God and there's certain behavior that's wrong and certain behavior that's right, if you want that, you should be able to choose a school that reinforces what the parent believes. Today, you can't do it unless you want to pay extra and you've got a fortune to pay for tuition.
Bill?
Yeah, I would again, echoing what Frank said, it's really sad that we've got to this point in America where you can't even recite the Ten Commandments. You can't even use the word God. I know when I was coming up, and I'm from the Midwest, we started out school with prayer, and I'm glad we did. And we've gotten so far away from God and religion, whatever, in this country that I don't know if we'll get back. I hope we will, and I pray that we will. But I know it's going to start with the next generation, and choice is one of the ways of doing it, giving parents the opportunity to reinforce their value system in the school system instead of having those that are completely opposite forcing their children to accept their belief system.
We only have a little bit of time left, but what would you say to people out there tonight, in particular the African American community that's been supportive of the NAACP? What would you say to them?
Well, again, I don't know how many black or Afro-Americans, whatever you call it, really support the NAACP. I think it's one of those civil rights organizations that's from the past, because they're certainly not in tune with what's going on now. But certainly in a local level, they need to push and let the leadership know that, hey, if you really care about us, if you really want to speak for us, give us free choice in education.
Well, we're at the end of our show. I want to thank you both. Our guests tonight were Bill Andrews and Frank Russo, co-host Patty Knapp, and we've been discussing the NAACP and the issue of school choice. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Good night.